I would like to introduce Bill Mann. Bill was with Greater Construction for 12 years, president for 3 years. He's a licensed contractor and engineer, and Bill has been involved with the common interest development industry for years. Over
1980.
I was going to say, yeah, over 30
time.
years, and he's experienced all different aspects of common interest development, but he specializes in construction. Excellent man, excellent information, and I'm going to go ahead and let you start.
Okay. So I'm going to kind of talk about a little bit about the difference between maintenance and replacement, because I think a lot of associations I see, particularly in the current economic environment we're in, is they're postponing or deferring maintenance because they're trying to make budgets balance and keep the lawn green and all that, and I get that. The problem is there's cost to deferring things. It'd be like driving your car and not changing the oil. It's like, you know, maybe the engine will last 30,000 miles, but it's not going to last 200,000 miles if you do that. And buildings are the same way. I mean, buildings need to be maintained and looked at, and things need to be done to them periodically. And I see more and more of it in our current environment where that's not happening. Now, this is a really extreme example. This building's 10 years old. This is a building that's 10 years old. It's not, they weren't going for some, you know, weathered Cape Cod look. That's actually weathered paint. It's, you know, a 10-year-old building that had zero maintenance done to it for 10 years. And it's you know, pretty substantial. I mean, the siding shot, the decks are shot, even the roofs had so many issues from lack of maintenance that needed to be replaced. So we kind of went back because we actually bid this for the reconstruction, which is basically the entire exterior, which is a $2.2 million project. So I kind of wanted to go back and figure out, okay, over 10 years that they had painted and they had done roof maintenance and tune-ups and things like that, what did that number really look like? Because this was such a, you know, egregious thing of this board not maintaining the development. So we figured it was around $245,000 they would have spent in ongoing, regular, high-quality maintenance if they had actually maintained the community versus the big number that they got at the end. Now, in this number, about 250 of that was for mold abatement because they had so much water intrusion and everything. And that's what it looked like when it was finished. I mean, it looks great, but it should have looked like that when it was 10 years old with all the original components in place. So part of the things that I see people postpone, and one of the things we're, I guess, lucky in the environment we have now is the quality of these acrylic paints that we have on our properties last, and they look great forever. And I see people, you know, they'll go out and they'll look at it, you'll hit that 5-7-year window or 10-year window depending on where you're supposed to paint, and they say, you know, it looks pretty good, I think we'll wait another year. But there's a lot that goes into that paint. The paint's a very inexpensive maintenance thing, and when the painters come out, they not only put on a new fresh coat of paint, but they tune up all the caulking and sealant joints and things like that to keep water from going past the primary barriers of the siding or the stucco into the structure of the building. I mean, if to replace wood siding due to decay or failure, it can cost anywhere from about $14.50 to $25 a square foot by the time you get done with a project. So it's a pretty significant difference. Somebody was talking about it, they had shingle building. And shingles was kind of an interesting siding project. And I've done a lot of different analysis on that because we have a lot of those buildings that are getting down to that year. And one, it's very easy to repair. Unlike most siding, you can go put new shingles in, and then they don't look quite right. It's also amazing, we just replaced a shingle facade on a 100-year-old house in San Francisco that had been painted, and the shingles lasted forever because they had paint on them versus just natural weathering. But then you go back and forth on, you know, the paint costs and stuff like that. We did a big project in San Francisco in Diamond Heights, and they were going back, do they put hardy shingle on, do they put wood shingles on, how much is the maintenance? And then they looked at it, and the weathered shingles, because they have to scaffold their buildings to paint, was actually a cheaper option for them to say, we're not going to maintain our wood shingles, we're just going to replace them in 30 years because the paint cycles, because of the scaffolding expense, were horrendous. So it really depends a lot on your building types, on how you have to look at some of these maintenance things. And then also looking at the components when you do come up on replacements, what are you going to replace them with, and what are those maintenance obligations going forward. So there's a lot of different things. Now, everybody's buildings are different, and I actually offer to come out and do a walkthrough with the board and actually come present to your board on the different things that you guys should be maintaining, because I can kind of go over a general view here, but there are going to be some things that are going to be specific to your community, access issues and other things that, you know, we need to look at from a maintenance perspective. Destructive testing. This is kind of a thing I don't see a lot of communities do. Is, you know, when you get to a certain age, you kind of have to peel the onion back and see how things are performing underneath. Because we have all these beautiful cladding systems and everything else, and if water is getting behind them and getting where it's not supposed to go, it may not be apparent to the average person walking around. And a lot of times, if you bring out a forensic architect or somebody that specializes in waterproofing, they kind of know where the usual typical issues are to see whether or not there's any issues that are going on behind the scenes, so to speak, because those can be very expensive as you go on. This is a 5-year-old building in Santa Rosa, and we got called out to take a look at it, and had just sold. So we're going to probably focus on these balcony decks and these big stair systems, and it looks pretty good. You walk around, it was beautifully painted. It did just painted it, and it was pretty well maintained. But there were little things like stucco cracks along the top of these rails, and I'll show you a patio deck. They gave us suspect. So you can see here, there was a big crack, and these are the concrete patio decks. So these are elevated patio decks, and they have waterproofing underneath them. Well, we were a little concerned about the crack, and then there's some staining that was growing. We had some moss growing in the things. When we actually opened the decks up, they were completely dry rotted at 5 years old. So these are things that sometimes what appears to be perfectly normal on the exterior is not normal on the interior. And these are things where sometimes you need to, it's like going to the doctor and they do the MRI and the blood workup. It's more than just tapping your knee and tell you the cause.
Aren't you also saying that on this destructive testing, since you're the buildings especially, there's that 10-year magic number that if you go before 10 years, you better get it done before 10
True,
years.
and this was certainly the situation. They were under the 10-year statute for construction defect against the developer. And nowadays with the SB 800 laws, you go back to the developer and say, will you fix this for me, which is a much better price. And a lot of the big builders like Toll Brothers and Pulte and D.R. Horton will come back and make repairs, so which is much better for the boards and management than having to go through the legal process. But you're right. You have a 10-year statute that you don't want to erode. So these are good things. If you're in that 0 to 10-year window, it's probably a good idea at some point to have this looked at. We just did it. Actually, I was really kind of surprised. We did a building up in Sacramento. They had us come out. It was almost about to expire the 10-year statute. We walked around, and from an exterior standpoint, and I walked around with 3 forensic architects. We picked out some little minor stuff that we thought was a problem and said, well, you probably should investigate this. It's a 160-unit development. The statement of claims is $12 million. Because once we started taking stuff apart, we were very surprised, like this building, very surprised when we found it. So,
are you saying that that is a result of water leakage or things like that?
There was two problems with this. Some of it was a little bit of water leakage, but the other thing was they didn't vent things right, so it condensated on the interior. What's happened in the building environment is everybody's gotten so picky and concerned about leaks. They use all these membranes and stuff to cover stuff up. Well, what happened is they don't also think about ventilation and condensation. And you're up in Santa Rosa, the fog comes in at night, and it heats up to 100 degrees during the day, and these things are going through huge temperature changes, and so any kind of amount of moisture that gets in there condensates, and then that's what ends up happening. And the other problem you got to remember is we're not dealing really with wood framing. A lot of this stuff is engineered wood, so it's particles of wood that are glued together, and and they just fall apart when they get wet. So here's the stair system. It looked pretty good. We were a little concerned about some of the staining here, and then there were some cracks in the stucco. And I absolutely could not believe it when we opened it up. But this was what was left of the framing. So the whole stair system, it should have collapsed. I'm sure why it did. But, I mean, I never opened up a building that was 5 years old that had this much dry rot. And so basically the stairs and all the balconies on this project had to be replaced.
And did that become warranty?
They ended up having to go back after the developer for it, so to do it. But it was also, here's a situation where what do you do? Shut all the stair systems down for the 2 years while you go through litigation, and we had to come in and shore. People couldn't use their balcony decks. It was a pretty horrific thing to afford to deal with. So stair systems are one of those things. How many have like 20 and 30-year-old developments here? A lot of code changes have transpired, and depending on what municipality is in, if you have to do a stair replacement, you may end up getting into huge code upgrade issues, and they're expensive. So you may